Intro. In the smoke and fury of America's bloodiest conflict, one man stood apart, not for reckless charges or fiery oratory, but for a cold, calculating mind that saw the war's harsh realities clearer than most. They called him Lee's Old War Horse, a steady, burly infantryman who became Robert E. Lee's most trusted lieutenant, commanding the First Corps of the Army of Northern Virginia through nearly every major fight in the East. A general whose defensive genius at Fredericksburg and Second Manassas helped the Confederacy punch far above its weight. Yet his story twists into something far more divisive. He dared to question his commander at Gettysburg, survived brutal friendly fire, then after Appomattox did the unthinkable. He embraced the Union he once fought, joined the Republicans, and stood with former slaves for civil rights. Southern society branded him a traitor, a scalawag, and retroactively blamed him for losing the war. This is the tale of James Longstreet, the most controversial rebel general whose steady hand and post-war choices still spark fury and debate more than a century and a half later. Born on January 8, 1821, in the Edgefield district of South Carolina, James Longstreet came into a world of cotton fields and frontier ambitions. His father, also named James, was a farmer with Dutch roots. His mother, Mary Ann Dent, carried English lineage from New Jersey and Maryland. The family soon moved, and young James spent most of his childhood in Georgia and Alabama, often staying with his uncle Augustus Baldwin Longstreet, a well-known lawyer, judge, and humorist who ran a plantation near Gainesville, Georgia. Uncle Gus was a fierce advocate for states' rights, and those fireside talks likely planted early seeds of Southern identity in the boy. Life wasn't easy or lavish. James grew up sturdy, practical, with a no-nonsense demeanor that would mark his entire career. He wasn't bookish like some future officers. He preferred the outdoors, horses, and the rough edges of plantation life. At 17, he secured an appointment to the United States Military Academy at West Point from Alabama. He entered in 1838 and graduated in 1842, ranking 54th out of 62 cadets. Not a star scholar, but solid enough. His class included future legends like Ulysses S. Grant, with whom he struck up a lasting friendship. Longstreet was posted to the 4th U.S. Infantry as a brevet second lieutenant. Frontier duty followed in Missouri and Texas, the kind of monotonous service that tested a young officer's patience. Then came the Mexican-American War in 1846. Here, Longstreet found his element. He fought with distinction at Contreras, Churubusco, and especially Chapultepec, where he took a serious wound storming the castle. He earned 2 brevet promotions for gallantry and caught the eye of superiors. During the war, he served alongside men who would later face him across Civil War battle lines, Grant among them. In 1848, back in civilian-adjacent life, he married Maria Louisa Garland, daughter of a fellow officer. They would have 10 children together, though tragedy would shadow the family deeply. For the next dozen years, Longstreet served quietly in the regular army, paymaster duties, frontier posts in the Southwest. By 1858, he was a major. He wasn't flashy. No duels, no headlines, just competent, reliable service. When secession came after Fort Sumter in 1861, Longstreet resigned his U.S. commission and offered his sword to the Confederacy. He was 39, a family man with deep Southern ties, and like many, he chose his home over the Union. He started as a brigadier general, quickly rising. His first real test came at 1st Manassas in July 1861. Commanding a brigade, he helped stabilize the Confederate line and contributed to the rout of the Union Army. Promotion followed. By early 1862, he led a division under Joseph E. Johnston during the Peninsula Campaign. The 7 days battles around Richmond in June and July 1862 exposed both his strengths and flaws. Longstreet's division saw hard fighting at Gaines's Mill and Glendale, where he showed calm under pressure and handled large formations effectively. But coordination issues plagued the Confederate attacks overall, and Longstreet himself got tangled in delays and arguments with other commanders like Benjamin Huger. He later tried to shift some blame, a habit that would surface again. Still, Robert E. Lee, who took command after Johnston was wounded, noticed Longstreet's steadiness. Lee began relying on him more and more, nicknaming him "my old war horse." The bond deepened through the brutal summer and fall of 1862. At Second Manassas in August, Longstreet's massive counterattack on the Union left flank crushed John Pope's army in one of the war's most decisive Confederate victories. His corps slammed into the Federals with overwhelming force, rolling them up and sending them reeling toward Washington. Longstreet had advocated for this aggressive move, and it paid off handsomely. Then came Antietam in September. Though the battle ended in a tactical draw, Longstreet's men held the Confederate center against repeated assaults, buying Lee time to withdraw. His troops respected him as Old Pete, a tough cigar-chomping bulldog who looked after his soldiers and didn't waste words. December 1862 brought Fredericksburg, where Longstreet's defensive mastery shone brightest. Positioned on Mary's Heights behind a stone wall, his corps turned the open ground into a killing field. Wave after wave of Union attackers under Ambrose Burnside were shredded by rifle and artillery fire. Over 12,000 Federal casualties piled up for minimal Confederate losses. Longstreet reportedly told a subordinate something like, "General, if you put your men in that position, they will be mowed down like grass." The position held, and the victory boosted Southern morale when it was badly needed. Lee leaned on him even heavier. Longstreet pushed for an offensive-defensive strategy, fight on ground of their choosing, bleed the North through attrition and superior defenses rather than costly invasions. He believed the South's limited manpower couldn't sustain Lee's bolder offensives forever. But 1863 tested that philosophy. Longstreet missed Chancellorsville, detached on a foraging and siege operation near Suffolk, Virginia. Stonewall Jackson's famous flank march and mortal wounding happened without him. When he returned, Lee was already planning the invasion of Pennsylvania. Longstreet had serious doubts. He argued for maneuvering to threaten Washington or Baltimore, forcing the Union Army to attack on favorable ground or even swinging west to relieve pressure on Vicksburg. Lee, fresh off victory, wanted to strike north and win a decisive battle on northern soil. The two clashed in council. Longstreet preferred waiting for the enemy to come to them. Lee insisted. They marched into Pennsylvania anyway. July 1st to 3rd, 1863, at Gettysburg became the flashpoint of Longstreet's controversy. On the first day, Confederates drove Union forces back through town to Cemetery Hill, but didn't seize the high ground immediately. Longstreet arrived and urged Lee to disengage, swing around the Union left, and find better ground between the Army of the Potomac and Washington. Lee refused. On July 2nd, Longstreet was ordered to attack the Union left flank. He delayed, arguing again for a different approach and waiting for his full corps to assemble after a long march. Critics later accused him of deliberate slowness, even sabotage. When the attack finally went in late that afternoon, it nearly succeeded. His men smashed through parts of the line at the Peach Orchard, Wheatfield, and Devil's Den, but Union reinforcements and stubborn defense held. Longstreet lost key subordinates, and the assault stalled with heavy cost. On July 3rd, Lee ordered the grand assault that became Pickett's charge against the Union center on Cemetery Ridge. Longstreet opposed it vehemently. He believed no infantry could cross that open ground against massed artillery and entrenched rifles. He reportedly told Lee it was hopeless and even suggested alternatives. Lee overruled him. Longstreet, loyal despite his misgivings, prepared the attack. As 12,500 men stepped off, he rode among them, heavy-hearted. The charge was a slaughter. Over half the attackers fell. Lee later took full blame. All this has been my fault. But in the years after, as the lost cause narrative took hold, others pointed fingers at Longstreet. They claimed his delays on July 2nd cost the chance for victory. They said his pessimism infected the Army. Jubal Early and others launched a campaign to shift blame from Lee, portraying Longstreet as slow, insubordinate, even disloyal. The attacks would intensify post-war. After Gettysburg's defeat, Longstreet took his corps west to reinforce Braxton Bragg. At Chickamauga in September 1863, his timely arrival and powerful assault on the second day helped shatter the Union line, creating one of the Confederacy's greatest victories in the Western theater. He chased the broken Federals but couldn't deliver a knockout. Tensions with Bragg boiled over. Longstreet criticized his superior openly and was given an independent command to capture Knoxville. The effort failed. By spring 1864, he was back with Lee in Virginia, just in time for the overland campaign against Ulysses S. Grant. At the Battle of the Wilderness on May 6, 1864, Longstreet's corps executed a brilliant flank attack that rolled up the Union right, much like Jackson had done the year before at Chancellorsville. Momentum was building. Then, tragedy. As his men advanced through thick woods, Confederate troops mistook them for the enemy in the smoke and chaos. Friendly fire ripped into Longstreet's party. A bullet shattered his throat and right shoulder. He was carried from the field, badly wounded, his right arm partially paralyzed. He survived, but missed the brutal fights at Spotsylvania and Cold Harbor. Recuperating, he taught himself to write left-handed. He returned in October, still in pain, commanding defenses around Richmond and Petersburg. His steady hand helped prolong the siege. At Appomattox in April 1865, Longstreet was there when Lee surrendered. His old friend Grant offered generous terms. Longstreet later recalled grasping Grant's hand and suggesting they play a game of brag like old times. The war was over. Longstreet had given 4 years, multiple wounds, and his reputation for loyalty. Defeat left him broken in fortune, but not spirit. He moved his family to New Orleans, tried the cotton business and insurance. Then came the seismic shift. In 1868, Longstreet publicly endorsed Ulysses S. Grant for president and joined the Republican Party. To white Southerners reeling under Reconstruction, this was betrayal. He urged acceptance of the war's results, including black suffrage and civil rights. The only true solution for Southern troubles, he wrote, is for the people to accept cordially and in good faith all the results of the war, and treat all men fairly, whites and blacks. He believed cooperation with the federal government and Northern investment would rebuild the South faster than resistance. In 1870, he commanded the biracial Louisiana State Militia under a Republican governor. During street violence in New Orleans, his forces, including black troops, clashed with white supremacist mobs. He even advocated for black officers leading mixed units. The backlash was ferocious. Former comrades called him a scalawag, a Judas, worse. Newspapers savaged him. Jubal Early and others escalated their attacks on his Gettysburg record, publishing in Southern Historical Society papers to paint him as the villain who lost the war by delaying attacks and undermining Lee. Longstreet fought back in his memoirs from Manassas to Appomattox, defending his counsel and actions. But the damage stuck. He served in various Republican-appointed posts, including Surveyor of Customs in New Orleans. He lived to see some reconciliation, attending reunions, hoping old enemies could march together. But in the South, he remained an outcast for decades. Statues and honors came slowly, if at all, and often with caveats separating his wartime service from his politics. James Longstreet died on January 2, 1904, in Gainesville, Georgia, at age 82, from pneumonia. He outlived many critics. In his final years, he reflected on the conflict with realism. He had fought hard for the Confederacy, believing in its cause at the time, yet saw the necessity of moving forward. Modern historians increasingly credit his defensive insights as ahead of their time, foreshadowing the trench warfare of World War I. His counsel at Gettysburg, once dismissed, now looks prescient to many. The lost cause mythology that scapegoated him has been challenged, revealing how post-war politics warped memory more than battlefield facts. Today, James Longstreet remains polarizing. To some, he is Lee's steadfast warhorse, a brilliant corps commander whose steady leadership prolonged Southern resistance. To others, he is the general who questioned too much, delayed too long, and then switched sides in peace, embracing the very changes that upended the old order. His life bridges the Old South and the uncertain New One. He terrified no one with wild raids or flamboyant charges like some cavalrymen. Instead, he instilled quiet dread in Union commanders through unbreakable defenses and timely counterpunches that made victories costly and rare. Grant, his old friend, respected him deeply. Meade and others felt the weight of his corps at key moments. In the end, Longstreet didn't just fight a war, he lived its consequences with a stubborn integrity that cost him dearly among his own people. A rebel general whose greatest controversy came not on the battlefield, but in choosing reconciliation over resentment. His story reminds us that the Civil War's deepest wounds weren't always from bullets, but from the choices made when the guns finally fell silent.